Okay. So two important things that I mentioned in the last class was the upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. So do you have a clear understanding of what an upper motor neuron is and what a lower motor neuron is? So you're clear about that? Okay. So remember, upper motor neuron can have different origin, right? The fibers of the excuse me, fibers of the upper motor neuron can arise from the cortex. We call them corticospinal fibers, or they can arise from the cortex but do not reach all the way to the spinal cord. We call them corticonuclear fibers, right? Both of them are upper motor neuron with cortical origin. And we said there are some other upper motor neuron which do not arise from cortex, rather they arise from some areas in the subcortical region. We talk about the rubrospinal tract, we talked about the tectospinal tract. We just mentioned those, we didn't talk much about those. So I will talk a bit about those as well. Now, if all of you are ready, is it okay if I start sharing my screen? Good. Okay, let me start to share desktop. Can you see my desktop? Good. So let me see, what can I do? Okay. So today we will be continue talking about the motor system again. And one thing before I go into detail of the tracts, you see here, okay, again in this, so this is the cerebral hemisphere, right? So now in between this color and this color, you see in between two colors, there is a line here. So that one is the central sulcus, okay? The central sulcus divide the cerebral hemisphere into the front of it. Front of central sulcus is the frontal lobe, and the behind the central sulcus is the parietal lobe, and then parietal lobe, there is another one, occipital lobe, that is on the back, okay? Anyway, so at least one sulcus that you have to remember, as I said, the cerebral hemisphere have lot of sulci and gyri, right? Gyri are the elevated areas and sulci are the depression in between those two elevated areas. So one major sulci or sulci, so in between these two lines, we call it central sulcus, okay? Now, the gyri just behind the central sulcus, we call it post-central gyrus, and that is the primary sensory area. All the somatic sensation of our body, they goes into this area, okay? Somatic sensation, remember, it's not all sensation. We have to be careful because our visual sensation is a sensation, but it doesn't go here. It goes in the occipital lobe, right? Our olfaction is a sensation, our hearing is a sensation, but they don't come here. That's why we specify it. We don't say it is primary sensory area. Sure, you can say it's primary sensory area, but to be specific, we call it primary somatosensory area. So this is bodily sensation, somatic sensation, okay? So that all come here. And then in between these two, this is central sulcus. Just and front of the central sulcus, this gyri is the pre-central gyrus, and this is the main motor area, right? So one thing is main motor area that we need to know. And then in front of this, in the frontal lobe, there is an area like this. Let me get the pen if we can get it. Oh, how can I get the pen? Let me see. Let me see. Okay, pen. Oh, no, not yet. Okay, so I got that. Okay. Now, one thing that you need to see here, so this is the sensory, you don't have to worry much about it. We are talking about the motor. Now, here is, you see, there is a little man here. This is called homunculus. Homunculus is a map of the human body superimposed on the brain tissue. Okay, on the, say, like if you think of this one, precentral gyrus. So this is the precentral gyrus, which is a main motor area, right? Primary motor area. And you look at the whole human body, you see the foot, the leg here, the trunk here, the hand, and the face and the tongue around here. Okay. Now, look at the the way the human body is distorted. Why it is distorted? Because all part of the body is not represented in the brain by the same area. Now, look at the whole leg and foot. Okay, this is represented in the brain by this much of area. Look at the whole trunk here. Whole trunk and the lower limb, they have this much area, and same amount of area is dedicated for the face. If you compare of the whole trunk and the leg, that's a large part of the body, right? But that part is represented by this much of the cortical tissue. Now look at the face. If you compare the whole trunk and the leg, how big, it's just the face is much smaller area, right? But look at the face, the area dedicated for face, the large area. That's how, if they were represented, according to the size of the body, then you would see this individual, the small man, would look like a real small man actually. But now why it is distorted? Because not all the area are represented in the cerebral cortex with the same importance or with the same area. Why? Because if you think of the function that the muscles that our axial skeleton or our trunk and the leg does, they do a lot of functions, but those are not very fine. But look at the hand. You see the area occupied by the hand, much bigger area, because you do a lot of fine work with the hands. So that's why you need more area, more number of neurons in the cerebral cortex that represent the hand, rather than those will be representing legs. That depends on how fine your function is. So that's you don't have to memorize it, but I want you to have a reasonably good idea. So that why it is important? Because if you see someone has, you hear about stroke, right? Stroke is the blockage of one of the small vessels in the brain. So now, similar to heart attack, when you have a heart attack, if a vessel of the uh, of the heart is blocked, the area which normally get its blood supply from that particular vessel will not get any blood supply, which means that will suffer from lack of nutrition and lack of oxygen. As a result, that area, the cells of that area will die. That is what happened in the heart. The same thing in the brain. We call it a different. Now some people, to give it more importance, they, instead of stroke, because some people, they don't even get it when they say stroke, they see everything is in the heart. But stroke is similar to heart attack, but that is in the brain. That's why some people now want to call it a brain attack actually. So now, if you see, because if you do a CT scan of an individual, if you see this area, the brain tissue of this area is degenerated, is dead. Now you will know by looking at that individual will have problem in the face. They will not have any problem in the leg, because leg is represented by upper part. You see this part of the you see this part of the cerebral hemisphere is responsible for the leg, the motor function of the leg, and then it extends into the medial side. You see, if you open the two hemisphere up, that goes to the medial side like this. Okay. So now if somebody has a stroke that involves this area, then the problem will be in the leg. But if the stroke involves this part of the cerebral hemisphere, then you will know it will affect the face. So that's why this type of map is important for us to know. As I said, you don't have to memorize it, but you need to at least know that the face will be in this area, the leg will be in this area, hand will be somewhere in the middle, something like that. Okay. So that if you see a blood clot in the brain on a CT scan, or if you see some infection in the brain tissue in some particular area, so you can relate which area you will expect the loss of function. Okay. And this is called homunculus. Okay. Homunculus is, I don't know, its origin, it's Latin or or Greek. But homunculus means, in English, it means the small man. Small man, but remember, this man is drawn, it's pretty distorted. Actually, it's not like actual human body, but distorted according to its representation in the cerebral cortex. So it's the same, right? So this shows the motor side, this shows the sensory side. Even in the sensory as well, you see face covers a large area, and then hand cover a large area as well. Okay, and then you see the trunk is not that much, only small area dedicated for trunk. And on the top and on the medial side, up on the top and on the medial side will be the area for your leg. Okay, so this is an important concept that we need to know. Okay, it's called homunculus. Now we get back to the corticospinal tract. Now I mentioned before that corticospinal tract is the most important descending tract, right? It's the most important descending tract, so we need to know a little bit more about it. So again, where the corticospinal fibers will arise, normally, to our understanding, they should all arise from the motor area, right? But yesterday we made it clear that not all the fibers will arise from motor area. In fact, only about 30% of the fiber will arise from the motor area. Another 30% will arise from the premotor area and supplementary motor area. And the 40% of the fibers of the corticospinal tract will arise from the sensory areas. Okay, that much do you remember that? Good. Now look at this is you can imagine this as a precentral gyrus, right? So that is the primary motor area or supplementary motor area, premotor area, those. So look at the fibers coming from. Now cerebral cortex has its very specific 6 laminas, 6 layer of cells that comprise cerebral cortex. Now the pyramidal tracts or corticospinal tracts, they arise from lamina 5. So that is something important, because if you see a stroke or any damage or blood clot is affecting lamina 5 of the cerebral cortex, then you have to worry about corticospinal, because you know corticospinal tract arise from the lamina 5 of the cerebral cortex. Okay. Now, see, these fibers are coming from the diverse area, right? Because precentral gyrus is a large area, right? If I look at here, you see the large area, right? So the fibers coming from here, 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 here. So they will come from all areas, okay? They will come from all areas and they will be like this. So these radiating fibers, they are called corona radiata, okay? Corona radiata. Now, as they leave the cerebral cortex, this is still in the cerebral cortex. Now, this area, you will see eventually this is the caudate nucleus. When you talk about basal ganglia, we'll talk about it. But this area is called the internal capsule. That is a very important area in the forebrain, in the cerebral cortex. Now, this is the posterior limb of the internal capsule. Because corticospinal is so important, we need to follow this, actually, how this one is traveling from the cerebral cortex down all the way to the spinal cord. Now look at how it is passing through the internal capsule. It is passing through the posterior limb of the internal capsule. Okay. Now one thing I want you to see here is that you see, even though fibers are widespread here, but as they travel through the internal capsule, they are bundled up actually in the small area, right? But so why it is important for us to appreciate or understand? Because if you have a stroke involving this particular area of the brain, only these fibers will be affected, right? If you have damage to this part of the cerebral cortex, these fibers will be affected, so like these are face fibers. Or if this area is involved, another area of the body will be involved, right? But it's very unlikely that you will have a clot that massive. So that individual will not leave, actually. So you don't have to deal with that individual. But depending on where the damage is, because the fibers are coming from wide area, so if a damage to the cerebral cortex occur in a particular area, you will lose the function of that particular area. But as they travel through the internal capsule, they are bundled in a small bundle. So they converge, all the fibers converge and they form a small bundle. Now, that make it pretty risky, because if you have a stroke in this area, it's damage to a small blood vessel, only the small area. damage to a small area of the cerebral cortex, which is posterior limb of the internal capsule, whole corticospinal fibers will be damaged. And there are about 1 million fibers coming from the cerebral cortex, of 1 million fibers of the corticospinal tract. Now, all 1 million fibers, they are bundled together as they travel through the posterior limb of the internal capsule. And also, and why I'm giving it so much importance, because if you look at the incidence of intracranial hemorrhage or cerebral hemorrhage, 60% of the cerebral hemorrhage will occur in the internal capsule. So very, very risky area. Only 10% will be in the remaining part of the cerebral cortex, the 10% in the pons, 10% in the cerebellum. So you don't have to know those numbers, but you need to know that the fibers are pretty bundled and compressed as they travel through the internal capsule. And any infarction or any stroke involving the posterior limb of the internal capsule will involve most of the fibers of the corticospinal tract. Okay, so that's why I'm just making a point. So now, as they travel through the midbrain, I will show you a section of the midbrain actually when we go to the lab. So this part of the midbrain is called the cerebral crus. Cerebral crus. So these are all the descending fibers coming down, and they will occupy, this corticospinal tract will occupy the middle 1/5 of it. If you remove the lateral 1/5 and medial 1/5, the middle part of the cerebral crus is where the corticospinal tract is coming through, okay, traveling through. Now again, if you lose a small area here, similar in size in internal capsule, you will lose here, you will lose about maybe 50% of the corticospinal fibers, right? If you lose this much area here, you may lose about 10% of the corticospinal fibers. But if you lose that much area here, a small blood vessel is gone, then you lost the whole corticospinal tract. So that's why it is important. If you cannot remember other areas, but at least remember the corticospinal tract will travel through the posterior limb of the internal capsule, and over there the fibers are pretty compressed, okay? And they travel through a small area. So little bit, and then when you come to the pons, this is the pons, and you see in the pons, the fibers are scattered again. They are not as compressed as in posterior limb of the internal capsule. So they will be like this, a little bit scattered, and then they will come to the medulla, right? This is the upper medulla, and this is the lower medulla. Look what happened here. Most of the fibers, these fibers originate from this side, right? Now, at the lower border of the medulla, most of the fibers are moving to the other side. Now, if you, between text and text, there are some difference. Some of the text will say 90% of the fiber will cross to the other side, and they will eventually form the lateral corticospinal tract, and 10% of the fiber will remain on the same side. They will form the anterior corticospinal tract. So here, until here, they are all same. Whole corticospinal tract is same. But at this point, at the lower border of the medulla, we call it medullary decussation. That you will see actually when I show you the medulla, you will see the decussating fibers. So at the medullary decussation, okay, and then these fibers make an elevation. As the fibers travel through the medulla, they make an elevation, clear elevation on the surface of the medulla. That is called medullary pyramid. As they travel through the medullary pyramid, we call them pyramidal tract. Also, as I mentioned, when they arise from the lamina 5 of the cerebral cortex, that lamina also contain a lot of pyramidal cells. So you can say they arise from the pyramidal cell, they decussate, they occupy the medullary pyramid, and they decussate at the lower border of the medulla. Okay, and 10% or 20% fiber will remain on the same side. They will form the anterior corticospinal tract. Why we call lateral? What is the difference? Why we call one lateral, the one anterior? The lateral one we call lateral because it occupies the lateral column of the spinal cord. And why we call the other one anterior? That one occupy the anterior column of the spinal cord. And in terms of their function, they have a very important difference in their function. Lateral corticospinal tract will supply the muscle. You see, we divide the muscle into two main groups. We call the distal muscles, okay? Distal muscles, the muscles of the limb, and the proximal muscles of the axial skeleton. Are you familiar with the axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton? When we say axial skeleton, we mean the skull, the vertebra, the ribs, the sternum. These are part of axial skeleton. Okay. And the appendicular skeleton, when we say appendicular skeleton, we mean the shoulder girdle, the scapula, and the clavicle, and the limb, and the lower limb. Okay. So these are called the appendicular skeleton. Anyway, the muscle that are in the midline, okay, like the muscle of the vertebral column, the muscle of the thorax, these muscle doesn't perform any fine function. They will, of course, they have very important function there, but their function is not very skillful, very fine. So those muscles are innervated by anterior corticospinal tract. And the muscles which are involved in very fine if a response, which is the distal muscles of the muscle, those we call proximal muscles. You see, in anatomy, we use this term very, very commonly. When we say proximal, which is something very close to the body. And the distal, when we say distal, it's away from the main core of the body, okay? So the skillful muscle, the muscle that perform mainly the skillful muscle, which are distal muscles, they are innervated by lateral corticospinal tract. And the muscles of the trunk, they may be big, bulky muscles, but they are innervated by anterior corticospinal tract. They are not involved in very fine, skillful function. Okay, so functionally they are different. They innervate two very different set of muscle. Their course is different. Up to here, up to pons, their course was same, but in the medulla, they are different. Their location in the spinal cord is different, but anterior as well. Anterior will also decussate, but it will decussate in the same. Say if the final fiber come from here, anterior corticospinal tract will come at this stage, they will cross to the other side. Eventually, anterior will also eventually represent them, will innervate the muscle of the other side from their origin, but they will decussate at the level where they will reach the muscle. But lateral corticospinal tract, they will decussate no matter which level of spinal cord they go to, they will all decussate at the lower border of the medulla. We call medullary decussation. Okay. So any question from the corticospinal tract so far? You can all keep your mics on. If there is a little bit of background noise, it's still okay. But I want to hear actually from you if you have any question. Or if I don't see actually, if you want to make any want to ask any question, just raise your voice, just turn your, okay, go ahead. Oh, I cannot hear you first. Okay, yeah. Are you muted? No, okay. How come I cannot hear you? Something must be wrong. Can other people hear her?
I can't hear you either.
Oh, so you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, I am good. So it is your problem. So you you better fix it. I think you didn't start your microphone or something. What happened? Let me see. I don't think I can fix it from my end. You have to do. No, we cannot hear you. Can you write in the chat bar? Yeah, go ahead and see if I can. Okay, I cannot because I'm sharing screen. I cannot read the chat bar. Can anyone read the question? So she didn't write anything yet. Why cannot I read it?
Hi, Dr. Said.
Go
So
ahead.
Ani wants to know if, she said, I guess my question is related to the percentages of strokes. Is there a reason why it is so high in the internal capsule?
That I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. But these are just statistical data. Okay. So when they see the incidence of stroke, they found that 60% of the cases, say like if they study a case of 100 cases, they see 60% of those involved the internal capsule, especially the posterior limb of the internal capsule, about 60% of them. But why they are more? One thing is that the internal capsule, so these are innervated by very small, it's called lenticulostriate arteries. You don't have to get into that. Lenticulostriate, very small arteries. Now, when you have a smaller artery, the chance of blockage and chance of being the ruptured is more actually compared to the other areas. If you have a, you see, it's very unlikely that your internal carotid artery will be blocked, or your middle meningeal artery will be blocked. That is very unlikely. Okay, but uh, you can, the smaller the blood vessel is, the more chance, and also depending on the position of the cerebral hemisphere. So they found that 60% of those cases, they involve a blood vessel in the internal capsule and posterior limb of the internal capsule, because people want to study detail of corticospinal tract, right? So when they try to do that, they found 60% of the strokes involve the internal capsule, the posterior limb of the internal capsule. Okay, now here is the posterior limb of the internal capsule here. Okay, this is the posterior limb of the internal capsule, and look at the somatotropic distribution of those fibers. See, we need to know it, because even in the internal capsule, you may have damage to different part of the internal capsule, so that you need to know how the fibers are oriented. You see the fibers of the face, they are around here. The fibers coming from the arm, they are here. Leg fibers are here, and trunk fibers are here. That's how they are organized. So this is the basal ganglia. I will talk about them later. This is the internal capsule. Okay, and this is thalamus. Thalamus is something important, right? Do you remember all the sensations that traveled through thalamus except for one? Which one? Which sensation doesn't travel through thalamus? One of the special sensation that doesn't travel through thalamus. You see, our vision, our hearing, somatic sensation all travel through thalamus, right? Except for one. Which one is that?
Is that olfaction?
Wonderful, olfaction. So that is the only sensation that doesn't travel through the thalamus. So these actually, I don't want you to memorize these pictures, but I just want to give you an impression that the fibers have a somatotropic distribution. Actually, as the fiber travel, it's not that haphazard organization. The fibers of the face will be in one area, fibers of the legs will be in one area, fibers of the trunk in one area, like that. Okay, now this is more like a midbrain. Okay, in the midbrain, this is the internal capsule. See how the fibers were in the internal capsule. So this is the crus cerebri. We call it cerebral crus or crus cerebri, this area. Okay, now if you look at this one here, you see the orientation is little different here. You see, this is the from here to here is the crus, cerebral crus, and this is the midbrain. Okay, this is a very important area. We call it red nucleus, the origin of rubrospinal tract. Do you remember rubrospinal tract? So this is the red nucleus. There are some very important area, and then this area, you see a colored area, this is called the substantia nigra, which is very important because substantia nigra secrete dopamine. And if substantia nigra doesn't secrete enough dopamine, then you can develop Parkinson's disease. So we will talk about it when we talk about the basal ganglia. But midbrain is and then the cavity in the midbrain is called cerebral aqueduct. So this is the cavity of the brain, cerebral aqueduct. These are some important. This is called the tectum. See, do you remember we talk about one the tract we call tectospinal tract? This is the superior colliculus here. Anyway, you don't have to memorize them, but red nucleus is something absolutely important, and cerebral crus is absolutely important. Now, if you have damage to this area or this area, you will lose a lot of function in the brain. But if your cerebral crus is intact, then your corticospinal will not have any problem, because your corticospinal fibers are traveling through the cerebral crus. Right now, look at the arrangement here. Face fibers are here, arm fibers here, trunk fibers here, leg fibers here. So that's how they are somatotopically distributed, actually, how they are arranged. Okay, so don't get into too detail of this one. Now this is spinal cord. Okay, so so which tract will this be? We are talking about corticospinal. So let me make it a little easier. So which one is this one and which one is this one?
It's the bottom one anterior, and then the one on the right lateral.
Oh, wonderful. This is because this is the lateral white column. This is the anterior white column. And which white column is this one? If we say this, these are laterals, this is anterior. What is opposite to anterior?
Dorsal.
Oh, dorsal, good. It's written here. Or, you need to be smart. See, it's written there, dorsal side. Or if you are even, go ahead.
Posterior.
Oh, wonderful. Good. So you guys are getting better in anatomy, which is good. At one point, our graduate student, they were allowed to take gross anatomy course with the medical student. If some of you are interested, you can take gross anatomy. Gross anatomy is fascinating. And there are a lot of job opportunity if you can teach gross anatomy. We are still in this difficult situation. We are hiring 2 people to teach gross anatomy. Okay. Anyway, so good that you realize it, that this is anterior corticospinal. Now, where this fiber, they represent the fibers of the trunk, right? Anterior corticospinal. This is lateral corticospinal. They will go to the distal muscle, the muscles of the leg. Some of them will go to the muscle of trunk as well, but some of them will go to the arm. But mainly these are distal muscle, not trunk muscle. So for the lateral corticospinal muscle, trunk is a least important area to go. Okay. So it will mainly cover the distal muscle, lateral corticospinal and anterior corticospinal. Now, so other than now, see one thing actually, when you see a motor response, I mentioned it, I think last class briefly. When you see a motor response, you see, I'm touching something. See, if I touch this thing here, you only see that I am touching, right? These 2 fingers, or at best my hand, you can see, you appreciate the action of my hand. But for me to do it, you see, there are a lot of adjustment made on my shoulder, on my arm, and on my forearm muscle. If I don't have proper tone in my shoulder muscle or in my arm muscle, do you think I can do it if my arm muscle is not working? But arm muscle is not doing the job. The job is done by my hand, right? But can I grab this thing like this if my shoulder muscles and my arm muscle doesn't work? Can you even elevate your hand? You just cannot do that. Because for this to happen, your shoulder should elevate like that, right? Now tell me, let me test your anatomy knowledge. This is not anatomy knowledge, this is anatomy knowledge for lay people, for everybody knows that. So which muscle will elevate the shoulder like this? We say abduction of the hand. Which muscle is this one? Everybody knows the name of this muscle. It's the deltoid, okay? Didn't you hear the name of deltoid? Deltoid muscle, even people in the street, they know deltoid, right? So they make biceps, deltoid. Those are the muscles people know very well. Anyway, so the point that I am trying to make is that when I do a motor activity, I only consider my hand, which is grabbing this thing. But to do that, there are a lot of background activity happening. You need to, if I lie down, I cannot even do that, right? If I fall down on my back, which means my posture should be maintained. I am upright, which means all my back muscles are contracted now to keep me upright, to keep my posture. So these are called postures, okay? My posture should be upright, and then I have to abduct my arm so that my deltoid muscle should contract and have a increased tone. My shoulders should be arranged in a place, and then only in that case I grab this one. But when I say what is my motor activity, what is the final motor response here? Grabbing this structure with my hand. But look at how many background things are involved in this one that we don't appreciate, but they are doing something. When you walk, we worry about only leg muscle. We say, oh, my legs are tired. But for you to walk, first thing is that you have to stand up, right? So for you to stand up, your anti-gravity muscle, the muscles of your back on your vertebral column, they should contract, keep you straight. Can you walk while you are lying down? You cannot, right? Because for you to walk, first thing first, you have to stand up. Who will make you stand up? That is your back muscles. That is your anti-gravity muscle. They should contract, keep you upright, and then you move your legs, right? But that is the final response. You see only the movement of the leg. That's what we appreciate. But we don't see those background things that are happening, that are maintaining your posture for you to able to perform that specific motor function. So did you get that? So this is something you need to appreciate, okay? So now that's why for any motor movement, our posture is very important, okay? So for the posture, two type of muscle mainly they maintain the posture. One is the extensor muscle. When we say extensor, they extend our back, okay? One is extensor group of muscle. The other one is we call flexor group of muscle, okay? Flexor group and extensor group. Now, two tracts mainly control the flexor muscle and the extensor muscle. The extensor muscle, which make us stand, is controlled by vestibulospinal tract. Vestibulospinal, they will extend your body. They will increase the tone of the extensor muscles. Extensor muscle, we also call them anti-gravity muscle, the extensor muscle of your back, right? That make you stand up. And the rubrospinal tract, that originate in the red nucleus in the midbrain, they mainly perform their function along with the corticospinal tract, mainly the lateral corticospinal tract. That is the function of rubrospinal, and rubrospinal will increase the tone of flexor muscles. Okay, rubrospinal will control the flexor muscle tone, vestibulospinal will control the tone of extensor muscle. So when your vestibulospinal tract is active, sending lot of signals, what will be your posture? You will be standing or you will be sitting. You sitting, for you to sit, that is the function of your flexor muscles. Your all joints will be flexed and you sit down, right? That is mainly done by rubrospinal tract. But when you have to stand up, then your back muscle extensor muscle need to contract, and that is controlled by vestibulospinal tract. Okay, now there are some supporting players here, right? One is for the vestibulospinal tract, one is pontine. You see, there are some reticulo. Do you remember I mentioned a tract called reticulospinal? In the pons and the medulla, there are some areas we call reticular formation. So here you see in the pons and in the medulla, this area we call that area reticular formation. Now there are some tracts, they arise at the reticular formation of the pons and medulla, and they come down to the spinal cord. We call them reticulospinal. Why reticulospinal? Because they arise from reticular formation of pons and medulla, and they go to the spinal cord. Okay, reticulospinal. Now, reticulospinal are of two types. One is pontine reticulospinal, other one is medullary reticulospinal, because reticular formation is found in two places, right? In pons and in medulla. Now, vestibulospinal tract, the supporting tract for the vestibulospinal is a pontine reticular formation. So vestibulospinal tract along with pontine reticulospinal tract will keep you upright. Okay, at least remember. So if you remember VIP, you see when you see a VIP, say now we are taking a class here, sitting, relax, and then if the president of the school show up in our class, we will be little nervous and we will tend to stand up, right? Okay, because just to show respect to the VIP, right? So if you remember that way, vestibulospinal, I and P is pontine reticulospinal. Those will keep you upright. Those will help you stand up. And the rubrospinal will let you sit down because that will control the flexor muscles. Okay? And rubrospinal will act along with medullary reticular formation, medullary reticulospinal tract. Okay? So posture is something very important for any motor movement, and posture is controlled, as I said, vestibulospinal will keep you upright and rubrospinal will let you sit down. Okay, it will control the tone of the flexor muscles. Okay, So again, which tract will mainly control the tone of the extensor muscle or increase the tone of the extensor muscle? That is vestibulospinal and pontine reticulospinal. And which muscle will increase the tone of the flexor muscle? That is rubrospinal and medullary reticulospinal. Okay, did you get that? Okay, now we get to a point where it is you have to just understand it in order to make things clear to us. Okay, now look at here. This is the cerebral cortex here. Okay, cerebral cortex, and this is the subcortical areas here. These are the subcortical areas, right? And this is cerebellum. Okay, now there are two terms you will hear more in the neuroscience. One is you will hear we are talking about posture, right? You will see they will say decerebrate posture and decorticate posture. Of these two, this one is called decerebrate posturing, and this one is called decorticate posturing. Okay, now let me just make the term simple. Decorticate means what? The cortex, cerebral cortex is disconnected. Decorticate, cortex is separated. Now cortex is not doing anything. And decerebrate is at a little lower level if the damage is at a lower level. Now let's go one by one. So you see the dotted line here. So the blue lines are the tracts. Okay. Now, which are the most important one? You see corticospinal. This is rubrospinal. We said they work together, right? This will control the tone. Rubrospinal will control the tone of flexor muscles. And this is vestibulospinal. Vestibulospinal will control the tone of extensor muscle, right? Okay. Now, see, if we have a damage to, you see a dotted line A. Now, if we damage here, which tracts will be damaged? You see, corticospinal is gone. Rubrospinal is gone, right? It's cut, it's separated. Now, one thing before we talk about this one thing you have to remember, higher centers, when they apply, when they act on the lower motor neuron, they generally are inhibitory to the lower areas, okay? So they generally, so if you remove the cortical, contribution, then the lower brain areas will do more than they normally do. Okay, did you get it? So now see, a upper motor neuron is coming with some information, right? And it is coming to the spinal cord, and lower motor neuron is arising from the spinal cord. Now the nerve that is arising from the spinal cord, which is lower motor neuron, going to the muscle, if you cut its upper motor neuron, the one coming from the cerebral cortex to the spinal cord, if you cut that part, muscles will contract more, because lower motor neuron always have some inhibitory signal they receive from the upper motor neuron. Now, if the upper motor neuron is gone, the lower motor neuron will do too much, and your muscles will have more contraction, spastic contraction. Okay. Okay. Now, if you get that, now look at this one again. So a brain is damaged at that area. Okay. Now, what are the fibers that you are losing? You are losing corticospinal and also corticobulbar. Oh, we talked about corticobulbar. Do you remember corticobulbar? They arise from the cortex and they go to only the cranial nerve nuclei, right? Like facial nerve nuclei, hypoglossal nerve nuclei. You know, those are the cranial nerves that innervate the skeletal muscles, right? Now, if you do this, what will happen? Now your corticospinal is gone, your rubrospinal is gone, right? But now what vestibulospinal will do? Normally, the vestibulospinal receives some inhibition from the cortex, right? Now, if that is not the case, now this reticulospinal fibers, okay? Look at this. So from the sensory areas, they will get excitation to the reticular formation. Now, reticular formation, look at where this fibers is going. Follow this fiber. Normally they are under control of the cortical fibers. Now cortical fibers are gone, so they are receiving sensory signal from here. So as a result, what happened? look at this fiber. Can you see the green color of this fiber? Now see, look at where this fiber is going to. This fiber is going to, which area is this here? What is this thing called? This is receptor inside the muscle. What is this called? What is this receptor located inside the muscle, skeletal muscle? Look at its shape and see if you can tell me.
Do you mean just the muscle spindle fiber?
Yeah, these are muscle spindle, which means these are the receptors inside the muscle, right? Now look at this one. This is a motor fiber coming to the muscle spindle. Now, if you stimulate the muscle spindle by stimulating its motor fiber, what will happen? The muscle spindle will be stimulated, right? Muscle spindle will receive this stimulus. Now, normally how we stimulate the muscle spindle? We stimulate the muscle spindle by stretching the muscle. When the muscle is stretched, it responds by producing contraction, right? That is a reflex, stretch reflex. Now, this is different. You are not stretching the muscle. You are not even touching the muscle, but you see a signal is coming, motor signal is coming to the muscle spindle, which is normally not very important. Now, when the motor signal will cause the contraction of the muscle spindle, that will stimulate the sensory fibers of the muscle spindle. Now, the sensory fibers will go to the spinal cord and it will stimulate the motor fiber that are going to the extrafusal muscle fibers. So, you see now, normally this is the loop that produces muscle contraction, right? This is the loop. Now, how you normally stimulate muscle spindle? By stretching the muscle. But here, how you are stimulating the muscle spindle? By stimulating the motor fibers of the muscle spindle. Now, when you stimulate the motor fibers of the muscle spindle, the sensory fiber become activated and they send signal to this nerve, and this nerve will cause contraction of the muscle, right? Now, which tract? We lost corticospinal, we lost rubrospinal. So which one is now doing the job? The vestibulospinal and reticulospinal. So which muscle they will do? The vestibulospinal and, you see, vestibulospinal and pontine reticular formation. They will increase the tone of the extensor muscle, right? Now, as a result, this is what will happen. We call it a decerebrate posture. You see, all four limbs are extended, okay? You see the extension? All limbs are extended. Okay, why? Because you disconnect the cortex at this level, right? Okay. Now, why these muscles are extended like this? Because muscles went into spastic contraction. Why? Because now you don't have the control of corticospinal and you don't have rubrospinal, which is a flexor. Now, vestibulospinal is doing too much unopposed and reticulospinal is unopposed. That is causing very severe contraction of all your limbs. That will give you a posture like this. We call it decerebrate posturing. Now, how we say this happen? This one stimulating this one, signal is carried by this one, and this one is coming back to here, and then muscle is going into spastic contraction. In those individual, if you cut the sensory nerve coming from the muscle, called the dorsal root ganglia, right? That is how sensory nerve come out from the nerve. Sensation come out from the nerve and motor signal going back to the nerve. Now, if you do a B, if you do a cut the nerve fiber in B, do you think they will be extended like this? Because they are extended because of this cycle here. This coming like this loop, right? We call it gamma loop here, coming from here, going like this from here, like this. So that is how you get this extension in all the limbs. Now, if you disconnect this one, now you break the cycle, so that you will not see this type of extension. This extension will be lost, right? They will be gone. So at least the hyperactive contraction of the extensor muscle will disappear, right? Now, if you do a C, C is cerebellum actually. Cerebellum always, you see the cerebellar nuclei that have an inhibitory effect on the vestibulospinal. Now, if you damage C, then cutting this one, you see, okay, let me go back a little bit. If you see this neuron, this is the alpha motor neuron, which is the final pathway to the muscle. This one can be stimulated by two ways. One is sensory signal coming from the muscle itself, or stimulation by the vestibulospinal. Now, when you are having this cycle, you break this cycle by disconnecting this one. So you release this extension, right? By cutting at the level of B. But if C is gone, if you cut C as well, by cutting B will not help, because now this one is stimulated by this one as well. Okay, a bit tricky though. So you see, normally how we get here, because our corticospinal is damaged, our rubrospinal is damaged. But what is the mechanism of this contraction? Mechanism is like this. You see the green fiber coming here, stimulating the muscle spindle, sensory fiber going in, and the motor nerve to the muscle is contracting. Now, to alleviate this contraction, what I want to do, I cut this one. When I cut this one, sensory fiber coming from the muscle spindle, I release this tension. Okay, because why? Because my loop was like this. We call it gamma loop. My contraction was happening like this. So to avoid the contraction, I cut it here. So I break the cycle, right? So the contraction disappeared. But if this part is damaged here at C, by cutting this will not help, because this one is now stimulated by this one. Normally, this one is always under inhibition. Cerebellum always have inhibition here, so that this will not do much for this one to stimulate this one. Normally, this is the cycle. So I break the cycle by doing this one. But if I do this, then cutting this will not help, because this one is now, if I cut this, this inhibition will disappear. So vestibulospinal will keep stimulating my alpha motor neuron. Okay. Now, so this, we got this. Now this one is much simpler. If I make a cut around here at D, just cerebral cortex is gone. So corticospinal will be gone, right? Okay. Now corticonuclear will be gone as well. So you will have problem in the of the muscles that are normally controlled by cranial nerve. But look at this one. Rubrospinal arises from the red nucleus, right? So this one you did in between two colliculus. We call this one A, we call it mid-collicular decerebration. Mid-collicular means there are two colliculi in the midbrain. One is above, we call superior colliculus. Other one is below, we call inferior colliculus. If you damage in between two colliculi, we call it mid-collicular decerebration. That is indicated by line A. That is what you will get, decerebrate posture. But if your damage is way up on the cortex, you lost the corticospinal, but you still have the rubrospinal intact. If you have rubrospinal, what is the function of rubrospinal? It works along with the lateral corticospinal and increase the tone of distal muscle, increase the tone of distal flexor muscles. So now, difference between this one and this one is that this one, rubrospinal was gone as well along with corticospinal. Here, rubrospinal is intact. Not only rubrospinal is intact, rubrospinal is not under the influence of cerebral cortex anymore. Because cortex is not in the picture anymore, I disconnected the cortex by cutting around D. So rubrospinal, not only rubrospinal is intact, rubrospinal doesn't have any influence of negative influence of cerebral cortex on rubrospinal. If that inhibition is gone, rubrospinal, what rubrospinal will do? It will increase the tension or increase the tone of the flexor muscle and flexor muscle of the upper limb, those who are involved in the skilled function. Now, because of that, you see your elbow is flexed, your wrist is flexed. Why? Why these two flex here? Because of the rubrospinal. And why you have still extension here? This is because of still this one. Okay. Why you have this one? Because we lost both corticospinal and rubrospinal. Why all are extended? Because of this loop. We call it gamma loop. This one. Now, what is the difference between this one and this one? In this one, your damage is way up. So rubrospinal is intact, and rubrospinal is causing the flexion of the upper limb. And lower limb is remain extended like this one, vestibulospinal. At the end of the day, you have to remember there are two type of posturing, abnormal posture. One is called decerebrate, and one is called decorticate posturing. Okay. And in case of decorticate posturing, why you have upper limb flexed? Because you have intact rubrospinal. Where is the rubrospinal coming from? Coming from midbrain, red nucleus. Okay. Now, tell me if you have any question. Let me stop sharing this. Or you want to go back to any slides for some explanation? No, then let me stop sharing and see if you have any question. Okay, now I can see the chat bar. I guess my question. Okay, no problem. If you have another question. Okay, thank you. Why was being no? Oh, okay. Okay, so you have to find, let me see actually what was the problem. No, now I can see your microphone. It's muted. I don't know why. So can you unmute and say something? Say hello to us. Nope, something still wrong. It's okay. You have to figure it out. I sorry, I cannot do anything from my end. So any question from the corticospinal and the control of the posture. And remember, your extensor muscles are mainly, at least you have to remember that your extensor muscles are controlled by vestibulospinal. Control means their tone is increased by vestibulospinal and pontine reticulospinal, that will keep you upright, straight. And your rubrospinal and medullary reticulospinal will increase the tone of your flexor muscle that make you flex the muscles and sit down. Okay. For sitting down, you need to flex your muscles, right? Your knee should be flexed, your elbow should be flexed, something like this. This is mainly the function of flexor muscle. But to stand up, your extensor system should increase the tone. Okay. And that is vestibulospinal. And remember, there are two major type of abnormal postures. One is we call decerebrate. You see, if you see decerebrate, if you look at the spelling of decerebrate, it's lot of E's, right? E. So remember, that cause extension. Decerebrate posturing will have all extension. All four limbs are hyperextended, right? Extended. But decorticate is, remember, in decorticate cerebration, decorticate posturing, you will have intact rubrospinal. So rubrospinal will cause flexion. So upper limb will be flexed, lower limb will be extended because of vestibulospinal or reticulospinal, and upper limb will be flexed because of intact rubrospinal. So that is the two different posturing: decorticate posturing, decerebrate posturing. Okay. So if you don't have any question, then let me finish here. And do you need the recording of this one to be uploaded in Blackboard? Okay, I will do that. That's not a problem. And okay, so if you next class will be Tuesday and I expect a wonderful weather on that day. Hopefully it will be around 60s. So be happy and come in person and take the test. So you will see at least each other as well. I will be out of town on that day, but I made all arrangements actually for the exam. Lee will come and with your questions, and she will the proctor the exam, and then she will collect the exam papers from you guys. Okay. In the meantime, I will be out, but if you have anything, just send me email. Okay. I will try to respond. Thank you so much. I will upload this recording. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.